Elisa Lam was a student. She was smart and curious about the world. She came from British Columbia in Canada. In the winter of 2013, she decided to go on an adventure. She planned a solo trip down the west coast of the United States. It was a journey of discovery. Elisa documented her thoughts and feelings on a blog. She wrote about her excitement. She also wrote about her struggles with loneliness and her mental health. Her words painted a picture of a young woman trying to find her place. She was looking for connection in a world that often felt vast and isolating. Her journey was meant to be a new chapter, a fresh start. She arrived in Los Angeles at the end of January. She checked into the Cecil Hotel. It was a place with a dark and troubled past. Located near Skid Row, the hotel had seen its share of tragedy. It was known for suicides, mysterious deaths, and even housed serial killers. But for Elisa, it was just a place to stay. It was a base for her exploration of the city. She called her parents every single day. These calls were a lifeline, a connection back home. They were a routine that reassured her family that she was safe and well. The calls were consistent, a daily promise. Then, on January 31st, the calls stopped. Her parents waited, but the phone never rang. Panic began to set in. They knew something was wrong. This was not like Elisa. They immediately reported her missing to the Los Angeles Police Department. The search began. Police scoured her hotel room. They interviewed staff and guests, but there were no clues. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The days turned into weeks. Her family waited in agony. The world watched, wondering what had happened to the bright young student who had traveled so far from home. The answer was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Hotel guests started to complain. The water in their rooms was discolored. It tasted strange. The pressure was low. On February 19th, a maintenance worker went to the roof to check the large water tanks. He climbed a ladder and lifted the heavy lid of one of the cisterns. Inside, he found Elisa Lam's body. She was floating in the dark water. Her clothes were in the tank with her. The mystery of her disappearance was over. But the mystery of her death had just begun. How did she get up there and why? The police needed leads. They needed something to explain this impossible situation. So they released a piece of evidence to the public. It was a surveillance video from one of the hotel's elevators. The footage was taken on the last day Elisa was seen alive. It quickly went viral. People all over the world watched the silent, grainy video. It was deeply unsettling. The video shows Elisa acting strangely. She steps into the elevator and presses multiple buttons. The doors don't close. She peeks out into the hallway, then quickly retreats back into the corner of the elevator as if hiding from someone. Her movements were bizarre and erratic. She stepped in and out of the elevator. She made strange, fluid gestures with her hands. At times, it looked like she was talking to someone just out of the camera's view. But there was no one there. The elevator doors remained open for an unusually long time, almost as if they were malfunctioning. The footage was just under 4 minutes long, but it created an endless loop of questions. Was she playing a game? Was she afraid of someone? Or was she experiencing some kind of mental health crisis? The video offered no clear answers, only more confusion. The public became obsessed. Online detectives and amateur sleuths dissected every frame. Theories exploded across the internet. Some believed she was being pursued by a killer. Others suggested a hotel employee was involved. Paranormal theories emerged, pointing to the Cecil Hotel's haunted reputation. People noted that the video seemed edited, with a timestamp that was obscured. The missing motive was a blank canvas. Everyone projected their own fears and suspicions onto it. The absence of a clear reason for her behavior allowed the imagination to run wild. It turned a personal tragedy into a global spectacle of speculation. Ultimately, the coroner delivered an official explanation. The death was ruled an accidental drowning. Her bipolar disorder was listed as a significant contributing factor. An autopsy found no signs of foul play. Toxicology reports showed she had been taking her prescribed medication, but possibly not in the correct doses. The authorities concluded she had likely suffered a psychotic episode. In this state, they theorized, she made her way to the roof and climbed into the water tank, perhaps seeking refuge. But for many, this explanation felt incomplete. The rooftop was locked. The tank lid was heavy. The official story left too many gaps, and the chilling elevator video continued to haunt the public imagination. 3 years later, another tragedy unfolded in a quiet, rural part of the country. This time, it was in Pike County, Ohio. The Rhoden family was well known in their small community. They were a large, close-knit clan. Like any family, they had their complexities and their struggles, but they were deeply connected to each other and to the land they lived on. They lived across several properties, all close together. Their lives were intertwined in the way that families in small towns often are. They worked together, celebrated together, and faced their problems together. No one could have predicted the horror that was about to descend upon them. On the morning of April 22, 2016, a relative went to check on them. What she found was a scene of unimaginable carnage. Across 4 different homes, 8 members of the Rhoden family had been systematically murdered. They were shot in their beds while they slept. The victims ranged in age from 16 to 44. The killings were methodical and brutal. A mother was found lying next to her 4-day-old baby, who was miraculously spared. The crime scene suggested a carefully planned and coordinated attack. The killers knew the properties. They knew the family's routines. They even disabled security systems. The scale of the massacre shocked the nation. Who would do something like this? And why? The community of Piketon was plunged into a state of fear and suspicion. Neighbors looked at neighbors with distrust. The investigation was massive. State and local law enforcement worked tirelessly, chasing down leads. But the case was complex. There were no immediate suspects. There was no obvious motive. Robbery was ruled out. It felt personal. This was an execution, an act of annihilation aimed at a single family. The question of why hung heavy over the small town, a constant, terrifying whisper. The search for answers would last for years. The investigation was one of the longest and most expensive in Ohio's history. Finally, arrests were made. The suspects were not strangers. They were another local family, the Wagners. The 2 families had been connected through a child. Hannah Mae Rhoden, one of the victims, shared a daughter with Edward Jake Wagner. This connection seemed to be the key, but it also opened up a whole new set of questions. How could a custody dispute lead to the systematic execution of 8 people? The motive seemed impossibly small for such an immense and brutal crime. The arrests of the Wagner family sent another shockwave through the community. The alleged perpetrators had lived among them for years. They were neighbors, acquaintances. The motive, when it was finally revealed, seemed both simple and deeply disturbing. Jake Wagner eventually confessed to his role in planning and carrying out the murders. He claimed he was afraid. He was afraid that his daughter Sophia would be harmed or molested by members of the Rhoden family. He said he did it to protect her. This was the reason he gave for a night of calculated bloodshed that wiped out nearly an entire family. This confession was a major breakthrough for prosecutors. It led to plea deals for Jake and his mother, Angela. They agreed to testify against the other family members involved. But for the community and the surviving relatives of the Rhodens, the motive felt hollow. It felt insufficient. Could a fear, even a deeply held one, truly justify the execution of 8 people? The victims included parents, siblings, and cousins. They were killed with a cold, merciless precision. The explanation of protecting a child seemed to stretch the bounds of belief. It did not seem to match the sheer brutality of the act. The legal process moved forward, but a sense of unease remained. George Wagner IV, Jake's brother, went to trial. He maintained his innocence. Prosecutors argued that the true motive was about control, not just custody. They painted a picture of a controlling family, obsessed with keeping the child, Sophia, for themselves. They suggested the Wagners operated with a twisted sense of family loyalty, where any perceived threat had to be eliminated completely. Even with the pleas and the trial, the full picture felt elusive. The motive offered by the killer seemed like a justification, not a complete explanation. This gap between the crime and the stated reason for it has a profound effect. It leaves a community feeling that justice is only partially served. A conviction provides a legal conclusion, but it does not always provide an emotional one. The people of Piketon were left to grapple with the idea that their neighbors were capable of such extreme violence for a reason that seemed so disproportionate. The why was supposed to bring clarity. Instead, it brought more confusion. It left a lingering sense of doubt. The story was not over because the reason behind it all never truly made sense. Section 5. The Teacher Who Vanished. In the summer of 2023, another story of unexplained tragedy began, this time in Austin, Texas. Grace Chen was a 29-year-old elementary school teacher. She was loved by her students, her colleagues, and her friends. People described her as kind, dedicated, and full of life. She had a passion for education and for helping children. Her world was one of lesson plans, classroom activities, and the bright faces of her students. She was a source of stability and warmth in her community. Her life seemed ordinary in the best possible way. It was a life of purpose and quiet contribution. One evening in July, Grace left the school where she worked. She was never seen alive again. Her disappearance was immediate and alarming. It was completely out of character. Her car was soon found. It was parked and locked. Inside were her wallet, her phone, and her ID. Nothing appeared to be stolen. There were no signs of a struggle. It was as if she had parked her car, stepped out, and simply ceased to exist. Her family and friends were frantic. The police launched a missing person investigation. The community held vigils, hoping for her safe return. The hope turned to grief just days later. Hikers on a trail outside the city made a grim discovery. They found human remains. They were identified as Grace Chen. The cause of death was determined to be homicide by blunt force trauma. The news devastated everyone who knew her. The question was immediate and overwhelming. Who would want to kill Grace Chen? She had no known enemies. There was no evidence of a robbery or a sexual assault. There was no jilted lover or angry acquaintance. Her life seemed to be an open book, with no dark chapters or hidden secrets. As of today, July 14, 2025, her case remains unsolved. There are no suspects. There is no weapon. Most importantly, there is no motive. Investigators are stumped. They have explored every possibility. Was it a targeted attack by someone whose motive is still hidden? Or was it a terrifyingly random act of violence? A case like this is a community's worst nightmare. It suggests that violence can strike anyone, at any time, for no reason at all. The absence of a why is not just a missing piece of the puzzle. It is a chilling void that leaves everyone feeling vulnerable and unsafe. Section 6. The science of the missing motive. Why does motive matter so much to us? We seem to need it. It helps us make sense of the senseless. It provides a framework for understanding chaos. From a legal perspective, motive is a powerful tool. Prosecutors use it to build a narrative in court. It helps explain to a jury why a person might have committed a crime. While it is not always legally required for a conviction, its absence can create reasonable doubt. A jury might struggle to convict someone if they cannot understand why they would have done it. The motive is the story behind the crime. But the human mind is not a simple machine. Forensic psychologists like Dr. Catherine Ramsland tell us that motives are often incredibly complex. They are not always clear, even to the person committing the act. A killer might be driven by a tangled web of factors. These can include past trauma, deep-seated fears, a desire for power, or a simmering obsession. These feelings can converge in a moment of extreme stress, leading to an act of violence that the perpetrator themselves cannot fully explain. They might offer a simple reason later, but that reason is often just a rationalization. This complexity is what makes cases like Elisa Lam so endlessly fascinating and frightening. The official explanation points to her mental health, but this doesn't fully satisfy our need for a linear story. We want a clear cause and effect. We want to believe that people act for logical, understandable reasons, even if those reasons are evil. The idea that someone could act out of a state of mind so disconnected from reality is deeply unsettling. It challenges our belief in a rational world. It suggests that the boundary between sense and nonsense is thinner than we think. The same is true for cases with a stated but unconvincing motive. Jake Wagner confessed he killed 8 people to protect his child. This provides a motive. But it doesn't feel right. It doesn't balance the scales. Legal experts know that a confessed motive can sometimes be a way for a killer to reframe their actions. It allows them to see themselves as a protector rather than a monster. But for the public and for the victims' families, this self-serving narrative offers little comfort. It only deepens the mystery of what truly drives a person to commit an unforgivable act. Section 7. When justice feels incomplete. The absence of a clear motive has a profound impact on the families left behind. For them, the search for why is not an intellectual exercise. It is a deeply personal and painful quest. It is about understanding the final moments of their loved one's life. It is about trying to find some kind of meaning in a meaningless act of violence. When a motive is missing, as in the case of Grace Chen, the grief is compounded by a constant gnawing uncertainty. Every day is filled with unanswered questions. This lack of closure can stall the grieving process, leaving families trapped in a state of suspended sorrow. This feeling of incompleteness extends to the entire community. A murder investigation is not just about finding the killer. It is also about restoring a sense of safety and order. When a motive is clear, like a robbery gone wrong or a crime of passion, the community can categorize the event. It allows them to believe it was an isolated incident with a specific cause. But when the motive is unclear or random, that sense of security is shattered. If a beloved teacher like Grace Chen can be killed for no apparent reason, then who is safe? The fear becomes generalized, and trust within the community can erode. The justice system is designed to provide answers and accountability. It delivers verdicts and sentences, but it cannot always deliver understanding. For the Rhoden family, even with confessions and convictions, the official motive feels like a lie. This creates a disconnect between legal justice and emotional justice. The law may be satisfied, but the heart is not. The families are left to wonder if the whole truth was ever told. This lingering doubt can feel like a second injustice, a betrayal by the very system that was supposed to bring them peace. And so, the stories of these victims are forever shaped by the missing why. Elisa Lam is remembered not just as a student on a trip, but as the girl in the eerie elevator video. The Rhodens are not just a family, but the victims of a massacre with a bewildering motive. Grace Chen is not just a teacher, but the subject of a terrifying, unsolved mystery. The absence of a clear motive defines their legacy in the public consciousness. It ensures that their stories are retold not just as tragedies, but as enduring puzzles that we can never quite solve. Section 8. The enduring power of why. In the end, our obsession with motive comes down to a fundamental human need. We are storytellers. We need narratives to make sense of the world. A story requires a beginning, a middle, and an end. It also requires causation. One event must lead to another for a reason. In the story of a crime, the motive is the engine that drives the plot. It is the crucial link between the victim and the perpetrator. It explains how their paths crossed in such a fatal way. Without it, the story feels broken. It is a book with the most important chapter ripped out. Knowing the why helps us to heal. It allows us to process a tragedy and place it into a context we can understand. If we know why something happened, we can begin to take steps to prevent it from happening again. We can address the root causes, whether they are social, psychological, or personal. A clear motive gives us a target for our anger and our grief. It gives us a sense of control in a situation that feels utterly chaotic. It allows us to draw a line between the victim and the killer, to say, this happened for this reason, and it does not apply to me. But when the motive is absent, we are left adrift. We are left with only the raw, unexplained fact of the violence. The stories of Elisa Lam, the Rhoden family, and Grace Chen remind us of this uncomfortable truth. They show us that sometimes there are no satisfying answers. Sometimes the reasons for human behavior are buried too deep to be found, or are so tangled that they defy simple explanation. This is a frightening thought. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. It reminds us that the world is not always as orderly or as rational as we would like it to be. These unresolved cases stay with us for that very reason. They are not just sad stories. They are cautionary tales about the darkness that can exist without a clear name or face. They remind us that the search for justice is not always a straight line. The absence of a why does not diminish the loss or the tragedy. In many ways, it amplifies it. It leaves us with a profound sense of empathy for the families who must live with the questions forever. And it leaves us with the enduring, powerful, and deeply human need to ask again and again, why?